Hello. Hello, this Hangout on Air is live. And we're being joined by Michael Jennings. Hello, Michael.
Hi, Jay. How are you?
I'm fine. Nice to meet you in person. We've talked for a good while offline. Off air, I should say.
Yeah, indeed. I'm glad we could set this up.
I am too, and I'm sorry about the scheduling mix-up. I got confused and I just frankly forgot about the other event. I said I was watching a game today, and I said, "Oh, what did I do?" So I heard that. I immediately started to contact people. Komarov said he was wanting to join, but he has his own event tonight. I think he's doing a beer tasting. He does a lot of those at his house in Brooklyn. Interesting things there.
Well, it's cold and rainy here in Ontario, so this is the perfect event for me this evening.
It's a little bit cold here, not for perception, but time of year for Louisiana.
Yeah, that's one of the things. I think I mentioned this to you in some of my posts. One of the things I love about your reviews is looking at the background where it's sunny and I see green grass.
Yeah. Well, and we've got William. Hello, William.
How you doing?
Hi, William.
Hello.
Hey, and I apologize about the mix-up. Okay.
This time worked better for me. Or it's my work schedule, so the later the better usually for me. So this is fine.
We planned to do tomorrow night at the same time. This time, but I realized I had something to do. Michael, you're from Canada.
Yeah, Wasaga Beach, Ontario. So if you know Ontario at all, I am about an hour and a half north of Toronto, which is the province's capital, and probably about 3 hours southeast of Ottawa, which is the country's capital.
You've had a long interest in beer and wine and liquor, or one in particular?
Well, both. Initially beer. In my younger years, I was drawn more towards macro lagers, macro beers in general, stuff produced by Labatt's and Molson's. But in the last decade or so, I've been exploring the craft beer market. I still buy and drink macro produced beers and quite enjoy them. But the last decade or so, I've also been exploring craft beers. And here in Ontario, we've been having a real explosion of craft beers, if you will.
Yeah, I've noticed that by watching other Canadian-based hangouts, and they talk about that all, pretty much. That's all they talk about. They just love talking about it. Ontario. I've been to Toronto and to the Capitol building. Went to, and there's the big Queen Victoria statue.
Oh yes, that's Queen's Park, the provincial legislature. Yeah.
I went to the Rogers Center twice for the Blue Jays.
Yes.
2007. And then we drove across Ontario. Well, I'm not going to give you the whole, but we've driven it all around. We went to the southernmost point in Canada was something point. I think of it.
Point Pelee?
Point Pelee. My daughter and I went there, and it was on Canada Day, and so they had a cake, and we ate the cake, and we drank soft drinks. And then we went to Sarnia, been to Ottawa. I took a tour of the Parliament. Went to the Senate. They took us into the Senate chambers, and
well, you're up on me there because I'm 40 this fall, and I've never been to the Parliament buildings in Ottawa. I've been out front of them. I've walked on the front lawn, but every time it seems I go there, the tour, there's no tours running. So
you'd be 40. Well, congratulations. And that's exciting. Or maybe some people would look at it as a bad thing.
That's just a number.
It's just a number, but numbers have meaning. But time marches on. But
what was your? I know we're doing liquor tonight, but I'm curious. What was your impression of the Rogers Center? I know you go to different balls.
I was very impressed. I was very impressed, and I gave it an A score. And it was different and unique. It was the last of the multi-purpose parks. So it was sort of the end of an era and the beginning of a new era. That was a transition ballpark. So it was a very important ballpark in the world of baseball. And thoroughly impressed. People make a lot of ridiculous comments about baseball parks, and that they'll make comments about beer. Line from reality that if a person didn't go there, they may not go by just reading these ridiculous out of hand reviews.
Yeah, some of the comments are just over the top.
And William and I talked about that. They lack credibility. You know, I'll give you another example. Get to the actual bourbon, but in St. Petersburg, Florida, is a flashpoint at least 11 times to games. But some of these people's, and these are usually baseball fans, and there's baseball snobbery like beer snobbery, you know?
Sure.
They'll say outlandish things, and you say, go to a game there, you know? But then you get on a more neutral, say you get on TripAdvisor, okay? These are just casual, mostly people that are interested in what? Going on trips, tourism, stuff like that. Complete opposite. These are people that aren't particularly baseball fans. They just want to go see things, and they go to a game at Tropicana Field and they just rave about it. So it helps to look at different viewpoints to get a little better perspective, I think.
I would love to come to
Canada.
I would love to come to Canada because they have probably 1/10 the population of the United States. And that would be a lot of empty roads for riding my motorcycle.
Yeah, I think we're about 40 million. So we're a bit smaller population-wise.
There's a forum about that I look at often, and they will post their blogs about riding in Canada. The beautiful scenery, the mostly open roads. So I would love to take the trek up north sometime to make it there. And maybe catch up.
Oh, you'd love it.
I was there too.
You should. There's a lot of motorcycles out and about in the summer doing exactly that. They're on back roads, county roads, smaller highways, and it's really quite evident. We're just kind of getting into that season now because the snow's disappeared and the roads are drying up.
And you can always try
you right now,
cuisine.
Yeah.
Have you ever eaten poutine?
I have.
Really?
I wouldn't say regularly, but I would certainly say, several times a year. Yeah.
I heard one guy mention that he ate that for the first time and described what it was. And
did he enjoy it?
Pretty much so, yes. I think more so than he thought he would.
Yeah.
Sometimes it exceeds low expectations. And I think it's probably what happened there. But I would love to come. I'm a big hockey fan too. Huge hockey fan, and I would love to see a game at the, in Montreal or Ottawa or any of those cities, because
I think it was yesterday, I think was the 50th anniversary of when the Toronto Maple Leafs won the Stanley Cup. And if you know anything about hockey, it was also the last time that they won the Stanley Cup.
Although they seem to be on the incline now when they got the new coach from Detroit.
Yeah, there's hope there that things will get better. Unfortunately, that we've been here before, so I think a lot of Leafs fans are cautiously optimistic. I mean, we certainly cheer like crazy for them when the games are on, but you kind of have lunch bag let down at the end of the season.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine, like the hockey crazy towns. Hockey is a major sport in many cities in the United States, but they have a pocket of fans.
Yes.
Where in Canada, it's like a universal devotion, it seems almost like, compared to a segment of the. So,
yeah,
it would be interesting to be in that atmosphere to see that actually.
It's expensive.
And let me say one more thing. Let me say one more thing. When I went to Canada, this interest in monarchies, and so I went to Rideau Hall, and then I went to I did a lot of that kind of stuff, like studying the Commonwealth and monarch approach. Same thing when I went to the Bahamas. But anyway, I just wanted to bring that up. So that's something you don't get in the United States, obviously.
It's certainly rooted in the country because, I mean, as you well know, it's a Commonwealth country. I mean, there's pictures of the Queen on our money, and all our highway signs have the crown on them. And our government system, provincially and federally, is all, based on the British parliamentary system. We have, a governor general who's the Queen's representative federally, and provincially they have a lieutenant governor, which is the monarch's and the Queen's representative at the provincial level. So it's essentially a carbon copy of what exists across the pond, as it were.
Yeah. Well, that was interesting listening to all this, but some of the viewers might say, I'm not watching your channel to hear about hockey, the British monarchy, Canada, highways.
They want to talk about this, right?
I want to hear about bourbon. Okay. Okay, people, that's what you'll get. Look, I'm getting through it. But not too quickly. This is the new bottle design. I did some research on this. They talk about 1795, and if you read carefully, it's more like it may have begun in 1795 or around that time. I'm going to read a few comments. Francisco Sosa says, good evening. How are you guys? I think we're doing well. Victor says, what's up? I'm ready for an awesome Jim Beam review. It's more like a Jim Beam hangout tonight than a review. Blaze says, okay, literally put a picture of a jack-o'-lantern. Okay, well, for Halloween time. Victor says Jim Beam has gotten much awesomely sophisticated since the past. I have no reference point for that. For me, it's 2016. I meant to say an awesome evening with Jim Beam, you guys. Oh, okay. All right. So we've had it. Obviously, I've only had it with that little plastic 100-liter bottle and this. This is it. This is my experience with Jim Beam, okay? William, I think it's about the same, right?
I've got this one is about emptied out, a small 200 milliliter bottle, so it's reaching the bottom of the shelf of it, so to speak.
Mine's the 750 mil bottle. I think that's the one you have, Jay.
Yes, that's correct.
That's about 25 U.S. ounces. So it's roughly like a fifth.
I'm curious what the two of you paid for your bottle.
Mine was on sale at Mathern's for $13.99.
This small 200 milliliter bottle was at $5.45.
I paid, and this isn't uncommon, it just still illustrates the price difference. $29.15 is what it goes for up here.
Oh my goodness.
And that's not uncommon. Like, that's a standard price at our liquor control board store.
William, what did you pay again for yours?
$5.45 for a 200 milliliter bottle. But I was reading something on the Beam website just to illustrate how big this brand is. Beam has two distilleries in Kentucky, Boston and Claremont. The Boston facility makes nothing but Jim Beam White Label. And the other one in Claremont makes, out of every hour, 50 minutes is devoted to Jim Beam White Label. So this dwarfs completely anything else they make. And this is like Budweiser of the bourbon world. It is that huge. Or you could say in Canada, it's the Labatt's, you could say. But it's a huge product with an iconic following and, history intertwined with it. So it's really a part of Americana.
It's a beautiful bottle design. So as far as marketing goes, these people are past masters of marketing. If you look at their website, I did write an email to Jim Beam today, and they with me. They did respond and said they're gonna check on it, because I was asking them. I said, is the Jim Beam Choice still produced? Didn't get an answer yet. They're still showing it on their locator tool that it is available in Kentucky and other states. It's a 5-year aged charcoal filtered bourbon, whereas this is 4-year aged, and it's not the same product, but they're both 40% alcohol, I believe. But I don't think the Choice, someone told me the Choice was being discontinued, but I've not gotten any confirmation. I did notice that their listing, though, on the Beam Suntory website, they used to have a little listing on the side of the page that said Choice, and they talked about it. And then I noticed today it's not there. So that's making me think.
Is that the green label?
Yes.
I
Yes,
think
sir.
it has been. The Chuck Calorie blog is very informative. I refer to it quite often, and I think it has been discontinued.
So the locator tool is just showing what's still in stock, the back stock, and then it'll be phased out.
But I would probably pick up a lot of that if I saw it somewhere, and I'm just going to keep my eye peeled out for that.
If I see it in Kentucky, I'll definitely buy it, because it's one of those things that you'll certainly never see it again. I don't know how long the Choice has been on the market. It's sort of like Coors Extra Gold and some of these other so-called products that end up tasting better than the flagship. And I think the company worries that that's not a good idea.
They want to focus on what their main thing is.
Right, and I think that's why you've seen Miller push Red Dog to the far back and barely produce it. And I think they only produce it to continue having a copyright on it, trademark. And I think that's the same with Coors Extra Gold. There was too much chatter out there about how much better Coors Extra Gold was. And I think William knows, and you probably know too, Michael, that these companies monitor that chatter.
Yeah, by all means.
And I don't think they need second tier supposedly getting touted up that it's better than the flagship. It's not helpful, I don't think.
I know.
I really don't know.
I know at our provincially run liquor store, the LCBO, the only one that I'm familiar with there is the white label, which we're having tonight. But I'm just looking at their website, and they do list other products, but I think you have to order them in. They list a Jim Beam Apple, Jim Beam Bonded, Jim Beam Honey is the other one here.
On their website for Jim Beam, I don't know the distribution. It's a huge array. There's all kind of extremely expensive versions, which will run you a whole lot more than $29 or $30, or in our case, $14.
I would like to try the Devil's Cut, where they extract the bourbon from a used barrel by some process and then mix that with the other batch.
It's funny you mention that. I was just reading about that the other day.
That's the Devil's Cut means that's the part that the devil got, which is extracted literally into the wood. And by some process, they're able to get that back out and then mix it in with some other bourbon, which would probably give a very interesting flavor profile.
Now I'm going to read a few more comments. So Kylie Ray says, howdy, y'all, enjoying an ice cold Newcastle. Oh, and having that a little warmer than ice cold, but however you like to drink it. Nate says, I'm having an evening with a champagne of beers while watching you in the Cardinals game. Starting to do a little something. I usually buy Beam over other brands. Pretty solid whiskey. I can't argue with that. Victor says, Ron, what would be awesome is that bottles of Jim Beam would cost around $2. Yeah. Yeah, but then you would notice that there would be none on the shelf.
That's right.
Y'all should try Jim Beam's Jacob's Ghost. Yeah, that's that white one, huh? And then I'd be mad if Jim Beam decides to get discontinued. Well, we don't mean Jim Beam. No, we're talking about one of their called Jim Beam Choice. That's the one that seems to be gone. Buying liquor in the airport, the only to buy is use your boarding pass. Actually, some cognacs that are available only at international airports, believe it or not. Oh, Tim said I got some today. Tim, you should be on here hanging out with us. Okay. Right. I want to show you one more thing. Beam's 8-star. This is sort of their utility. What I mean is their well brand. And say I want a Beam and Coke, you might get this if you're not specific. Beam is of the Jim Beam. It came out in 1976, whereas the one we're looking at tonight, 1938. Okay, issued on May 21st, 1938. And the website actually talks about that a little bit. The Beam Distilling Company had been around since the 1790s, but Jim Beam directed the company after Prohibition, and they, in his honor, they named their flagship after him, Jim Beam Bourbon. So, 1938. This one here is from 1976, and like I said, what is the significance of 8-star? I have no clue.
I think you were saying there's hints of this Jim Beam and that Jim Beam, isn't there?
Like Jim Beam reduced down to a shadow of itself. It's a strange item, and it does sell. That is the odd thing about it, I think, but are probably to, like I said, restaurants and bar rooms below the counter, and they use it for mixers.
I enjoy Scotch and have for quite a number of years. And one of the single malts that I enjoy is Glenfiddich, which is probably one of the more common single malts that exist. Yeah. But there's a blended that's made by William Grant, which is part of that family, and their blended whiskey, I notice a lot of similarities in it. That it's called William Grant's, that you can find in the Glenfiddich, and so I will often buy it simply because it's a few dollars cheaper, and I don't honestly notice that it's that different. I'm sure some whiskey people will yell at me, but I find that there's a lot of similarities in it.
William was talking about how he thinks this company uses a base and then they build from it. Because here's another one, Old Crow is another brand from Beam Suntory. A lot of similarities to Jim Beam, except for in the price range, it's a good 30% cheaper. But similarities to Jim Beam. Now, here's another one that really does not have similarities. I'm just going to show it because that's the one you had mentioned to me first. I guess it's a popular one up there in Canada.
Yeah, Canadian Club. It is.
And it's aged 6 years, which makes it a lot more, in my opinion, complex. It's an odd item. I was reading about Canadian Club. They distill it in Canada, right? Okay. Down to Illinois and bottled, and then it's shipped back to Canada and sold.
I didn't realize it was bottled in the States.
Yep. Yep, they own so many facilities, they just figured out that it was cheaper to do all the bottling down there in Illinois.
I really enjoy it. One of the things that I like about it, I usually drink it neat, which is how I drink most of my whiskeys, occasionally with a bit of ice. But what I really enjoy about it is is it has a, I think they talk about this on their website, peppery sort of notes to it. Not like black pepper, but there's kind of like a sharpness.
You're talking about the
Canadian Club, yeah.
Yeah, I've noticed that. I saw him drinking it at the Knights of Columbus meeting, right? So I was like,
I think a lot of
And
the spiciness of these whiskeys comes from the rye component.
Oh, okay.
Right.
And a lot of people actually prefer the blended whiskeys for their affordability, and also, not everybody's a connoisseur. They just want something, and it's their palate. It lines up with what their palate agrees with. So, and there's a lot of this blended whiskey that is sold, despite some of the, derogatory things that's said about it. I mean, it definitely has a place in the marketplace.
Well, I think there's some terrific blended whiskeys out there from Canada, the States, overseas, and like we were talking earlier about people that slag macro-produced beer. I think the same can sort of apply when someone knocks a blended whiskey. I mean, I think a lot of the comments aren't fair. Some, not all, but some, like Canadian Club, like Crown Royal, they're very well done.
Yeah, and some of these comments are they're very melodramatic. It's like you're going to die if you drink it.
Yeah.
It's an automatic trip to the emergency room, and they're reading your last rites to you. I mean, there's legitimate criticism and reviews, but some of this stuff, it's just over the top. It has no credibility at all to it.
Like when they call it lighter fluid or something.
Oh, yeah.
One thing they like to say a lot is it smells like airplane glue. I have never smelled a whiskey that smelled like airplane glue, and I used to make a lot of models, do a lot of models. I'm going to smell these two Jim Beams. Well, the one they keep locked up in the attic. All right. Yeah. The Beams 8-star. Nothing bad, but it's just so muted. You're really not getting a lot of pickup on it. Bottle. This one you can smell it in the neck, so it's an odd item. We'll run out and buy it, but I know William is kind of like me. He's going to buy it just for the oddity of it,
The Old Crow is a pretty fair fight with the white label, because it's off the same mash bill, the same percentage. It's just aged 1 year less. And I have drank those two side by side.
Definitely a pleasant aroma. Hey, let's start drinking a little bit. We're responsible. The flavor is medium bodied. A flavor, I guess. Mellow hints of caramel and vanilla, and they say that aroma is oaky vanilla and a spicy backdrop. And it's new charred oak barrels. It has to be new charred oak barrels to be a bourbon, correct? Although it does not have to come from Kentucky, as people commonly think.
I can, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, you
so
often hear that remark about it needing to be from Kentucky, and then there's the whole issue, you hear about Jack Daniels, whether it's a bourbon or not a bourbon.
Yeah, according to technical aspects, it would be. You decided that they wanted Jack Daniels to be called bourbon, it would tax bureau guidelines in the United States. Am I right, William?
There's nothing preventing them from calling that a bourbon, but the old saying is they would rather be the #1 Tennessee whiskey in the world rather than the #2 bourbon in the world. So it's all about the marketing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's all about how they sell it.
They discussed on these forums about whether it is or isn't it's like politics and religion. It can get very heated. But the truth of the matter is
they go round and round,
preventing them from tomorrow changing their label and calling it a Kentucky bourbon, straight bourbon. But like I said, they like their place in the marketplace as it is right now. It's been very successful.
Yeah.
I was just reading how they describe Jim Beam, the white label, on our LCBO site, and they note that the white label pours a golden amber color and offers aromas of light floral, citrus, spice, and creamed corn. The palate is medium bodied with flavors of vanilla and caramel, followed by a clean finish.
I don't know about the cream corn, but I'll go along with everything else.
Yeah, that kind of strikes me as odd.
You know, because cream corn is sort of a salty type.
Yeah. I know, like, my own personal notes, you know, I get a sweetness off it when I breathe it in, and that's really quite pleasant.
Yeah.
And sometimes I almost get like hints of like brown sugar or caramel that come off it.
Yep.
Many describe this as sort of a butterscotch sweetness for the Beam product. Sort of runs across the board. There's sort of a signature aroma / flavor, and many of them will use that term butterscotch.
Yeah, I could certainly see.
I pick up, you know, bossiness. It's an odd thing. Mold, you know, in general, all the humidity, there's a lot of mold, okay? A lot. Mold. And that's why people's nose running all the time. But that thing, and then I think it has like a green wood taste almost. I don't know, it's an odd. Also, as a counterpoint, I've done blind taste tests where I've failed miserably. Talking about, and I did not. So take that into account.
I really like the taste tests that you do, and I you know, I hope to in the near future try some of my own, because you know, I have to admit, I'm not convinced by any stretch of the means that I would be able to identify the stuff that I think I would be able to identify. I like to think I would, but I'm not convinced that I could. And I think it's a really good exercise.
It is. It can be very humbling.
Yeah.
When you have sort of these fixed notions, and in a few seconds it's destroyed. But sometimes you can find, you know, you might find you like one product more than the other one, although you thought you did just the opposite. I've found these very, very illuminating, the ones I've done, the side by sides and the taste test and stuff like that. It's a lot of fun actually for an enthusiast.
Mentally, you think, oh, I'll be able to easily tell them apart. But when it's blind and all you load a glass and you mix them up, you start testing, so surprised.
That's when the rubber meets the road.
And I would like to see a lot of these people make outlandish comments on the internet do that blind taste test, but I don't think a lot of them would. Too much crow.
I said that recently. Recently, I was with a friend and we were talking about, you know, the taste of different beers. And I said, you know, he was saying how he didn't like a certain product. And I said, do you think that you could identify it in a blind taste test? And he thought he could. And we didn't do a test or anything, but I really question it, because some of them are so, you know, while they have their differences, they are so similar. And, you know, I think you really see that when you look at some of the macro produced beers here in Canada and in the United States. You know, one that will come to mind is I really enjoy Pabst Blue Ribbon. But, you know, if I'm comparing it to something like Coors Banquet, which I also really like, I'm not sure in a blind taste test that I would necessarily be able to identify the two. When I'm drinking Pabst, I think, oh yeah, no problem, I could for sure. But if it was a blind test, I'm not convinced.
No, and
that mirrors my comments when I started to get into beer at first. You have it. in isolation, you think, well, I know what this beer tastes like, the profile. You sort of make a mental file of it.
Yeah.
Then you sit side by side and you take those two sips. All of a sudden, it's like the computer just exploded in your mind. I'm not so sure about this. You know, it's totally different. And with the beer, there's so many variables. If you drink two, they should be drank at the same temperature. There's an optimum temperature. The variables, the type of glass you drink it in. You know, there's so many things that, because they are so similar, the least thing can sort of can distort what your impression of it is.
Yeah.
When I do those blind taste tests, I always try to use the same amount, the same size glass. Of course, they're both coming out the cabinet at the same temperature. I'm not pulling one out the fridge and one out of the cabinet, because you, like you're saying, you start bringing in too many variables and you've pretty much proved nothing.
Yeah.
Sort of like a lot of these scientific people will make. Questioning them about variables and they get angry. But wait a minute.
And I think,
don't tell me it's settled science and you don't want to discuss variables. Are you a scientist or am I the scientist? Because, well, that's another. Think about this. I mean, do you like the Jim Beam? I'm really liking it. I mean, it's the kind of thing I would buy again. I probably never will buy it again because I've got to make the rounds, and it's about 10,000 rounds I got to make. There's so many brands in this world.
I love the, there's a sweetness when it first hits the tongue. I find that it's a very smooth bourbon. And there's, I don't know if dry finish is the right word, but there's kind of a dryness to it as well as it hits the back of my tongue and I swallow. I really enjoy it. I think it's a great product, and you know, I certainly always keep a bottle in my liquor cabinet.
People will say, "Oh, it's a macro product like Budweiser." But I'm telling you now, this is not slung together. Budweiser, that is not something that's slung together with no attention or care. Those things.
I almost dismiss them when they say those things because it's I kind of find the comments disingenuous.
Right, it's almost like posturing or something.
Yeah, yeah. Like, I mean, from the second that you pour this in your glass and you start to smell it, like, you know it's a good product. And when you taste it, that's certainly reaffirmed. I don't know how anyone could say that this is garbage or it's not worth purchasing. I mean, that's just not being realistic. And you know, I think it's kind of insulting to the people that make it too, because you know, the folks that work where this stuff is made, you know, they take this very seriously and they put a lot of time and effort into it as well. So I just, you know, it's really off the mark when you say something like this is garbage. It's just not true.
I'm sure they would roll their eyes when they read these comments. I mean, these people have devoted their lives to these products, and some snot-nosed kid that's got a computer gets on the internet, and all of a sudden he's a whiskey connoisseur.
Yeah,
I mean, it's hilarious. Some of these ridiculous comments that are made. You know, you lose all credibility when you make outlandish statements like that, because, you know, if you can't believe this, what can you believe else that you say? It's a quality product. I think it may be a little bit pricey for what it is, but it's a quality product.
Yeah.
And if you're getting into the whiskey tasting experiment, if you will, you know, it's a good place to start as well.
Yeah, keep talking.
It's a good baseline.
Yeah,
it's above the bottom shelf, as they quote unquote. It's sort of a mid-level whiskey, and it does form. You know, it would be a good starting point. You could go down, drop a notch, and compare this to like an Old Crow, or you could move up a mark and compare it to something like a Maker's Mark.
Yeah, I would love to be able to find something like the Old Crow up here, but I don't think it's carried in our provincial liquor.
That's a shame.
I should do a quick search while we're here. Hold on.
Yeah, that's a shame. I'm going to pour a little bit of this Beams 8 Star because I've just put it up, and I'm going to see if I'm noticing a difference, and I can guarantee you I will. My attitude towards Jim Beam is about 100% positive. Like William says, a little up priced, but I think that's because of the name. When you got the name, you can sell that name.
Yeah, you know that if you're going to go to the store and buy this, you know that it's a good quality product and it has a reputation, and that's why they charge what they charge for it. You know,
and it is less than the Jack Daniels. This price below the Jack Daniels.
Yes.
And but
I think Jack Daniels is, you know, there's another example though where because of the name they can charge what they charge.
I do think it is overpriced. I think it's borderline whether I don't think I would buy it on a regular basis. I would look at something like an Evan Williams Black Label if I was looking for something to compare that against. But the Beam at the price point, I think it's a little high, but it's not extravagant. It still, I think, represents a pretty good, value purchase.
And everybody keeps telling me about Evan Williams, so I need to get on that eventually.
I was going to say, that's one I've not tried. I'm curious, have you had higher end bourbons than this? And if so, what are they?
I've had Four Roses, 10-year aged, special edition, which people told me is over $100 a bottle.
Wow.
I love it. He gave me a vial. He bought it from a local store, and he paid an extraordinary price. And he was so thankful to the manager for ordering it for him. He had the special order. You can't just go in the store and buy it. These 2 vials to you. The other one was 12-year aged or whatever. And he brought a vial of that. Price over $100. Or told me, I don't drink this stuff. He said, you want it? Well, that's like asking a dog if they want Purina. I said, oh, yes.
I just finished off a mini of Cooper's Craft, which is made by Brown-Forman, which makes Jack Daniels. And it's about $32 for a $7.50 bottle, which is about twice as much as I pay for most of the stuff I buy. And honestly, I didn't like it any better.
No, and I was about to say that. I had the Four Roses, and I had the Pappy Van Winkle. Oh, they were wonderful, of course. No way they were $150 a bottle. Wonderful, relative to what we're drinking tonight. I just didn't see it. Now, now somebody else might say, "Oh, you go to hell because you." That's what they would say, but they probably say a lot worse. Okay. 5-ounce vial of each, a 5-ounce vial. I mean, I understand that, okay? Vials. But regardless, I did taste it. Telling you honestly, now would I do it again and try them again? I would if somebody would finance that kind of money to try it. I don't care. But so that's your answer, Michael.
It's all about the enjoyment you get from it. It's like you can, like you say, you can enjoy a Pabst Blue Ribbon beer, and then you can enjoy craft beer too. Sometimes I can drink a craft beer, but I don't enjoy it any more than I enjoy drinking a macro lager.
I totally agree. That's why I totally agree. Coexisting is a really good way to describe it. You know, they have their place, and they're both good. They have qualities that make them good. And to dismiss one over the other, I just don't think it's fair. I mean, if it's a beer, whether it's a macro beer or a micro beer, a craft beer, and it's not well made, that's fine. But don't slag on it just because it's a macro beer. If it's well done, it's well done.
It is. And like I said,
I can provide you a list of beers that are done, but most of them are not macro lagers. They're small company produced in some, as they say in England, dodgy brewery somewhere. Really bad, but the label is seedy. the written on the can is seedy and the beer is seedy. So when you buy a product that's seedy, what do you get? You get trash.
Yeah.
You wouldn't go to a store and see this stuff and think it's quality. But something like Budweiser, line for beer, it's not seedy. It's not presented that way. And if you go to their production facility, it is not produced that way. Talking about people calling what it isn't.
One of the
Queen album is Vanilla Ice, but I'm sorry, it's not. What now?
I was just gonna say one of the things that I've really enjoyed doing lately is exploring some of the beers that were here in Canada that were really predominant years ago that aren't as predominant now. So for lack of a better word, beers that, my father's generation grew up drinking. So Labatt's Blue, one that I had a while ago was Labatt's 50. It's an ale. And
Legacy.
if you ask people out on the street, they'll go, "Oh, Labatt's 50, that's an old man's beer." And, they're kind of silly comments because they've never actually tasted them themselves. And when I purchased the Labatt 50, it came in the tall boy can. I really enjoyed it. It was an older style ale. It had fruity notes to it. I mean, it poured nicely. It had good color. There was nothing wrong with it. I just think, different generations have different tastes, if you will, but the beer itself was a good beer.
Yes, and I was over near the Canadian border last year, and I bought a beer from Canada. Well, it's actually made in the United States, but it's an old Canadian brand that, like you would say, an old people's beer. What's the name of that thing? See my review of it. Victoria. Oh, what's the name of that?
Oh, Old Vienna?
Oh, yeah, Old Vienna, yeah.
Yeah. OV, yeah. That's exactly what I'm talking about.
To me, but people would roll their eyes and say, "Oh, that's an old man's beer." Oh, well, I liked it. And it was only $8.99 for the 12 pack. So what the heck?
Yeah. It's like the recent one that I bought was Molson Export. And it was, once one of the really big, huge beers here. It was everywhere. There was Canadian, Labatt Blue, and Labatt 50. And it was, it was ubiquitous, if you will. But, now it's not nearly as common, but I bought it. And again, I really enjoyed it, and I would probably buy it again.
I would love to get all those old brands, but of course, getting those are practically nil. I would love to try the Molson Brador. F Lines in New England always talks about the Brador, but it's still produced, but try finding it.
I got to see if I can mail you some of these, Jay.
No, I always discourage people. I get these comments from people all the time. I want to mail you beer, and I tell them no. And they insist. I need your address on. And I say, what happened? Oh, this and that happened. Well, why are you bringing it up? I'm not saying you would do that, but
Yeah.
And some guy from England, he was so excited. 23 years old, and he was so excited. I'm going to send you all these beers. He made this big list, and then he's telling me, "Well, how do you do that?" I said, "What?" And he goes and he finds out. I don't believe how much it's going to cost me to mail those beers. I said, "Yeah, I would believe it right off the bat not to do it." He says, "I can't afford that. I'm a college student." I told you from the first paragraph not to do it.
Yeah.
I've got a can of the Molson Triple X in the fridge right now.
Oh,
Have you had
yes.
that before?
I have not had it. I purchased, I was on a trip, and I purchased some Labatt Blue, and I purchased some of the Molson Triple X and the Molson Ice, several of the brands that we don't get in this area that are widely available. But I have the 7.3 Triple X I haven't opened yet.
That is a jewel.
But I enjoy these
contacted. I did get a contact.
beers or heritage beers. I mean, it does. It takes you back in time. I've mentioned a few times. It's like you're drinking a little part of history when you're drinking these beers, and to me, that appeals to me.
Yeah. I think, you know, that historical aspect is in these bourbons as well, and the different whiskeys you drink. I mean, to know that they have, you know, 150 years behind them or 200 years behind them, and that they've essentially been making it the same way. I mean, that's kind of a neat thing when you think about it.
So many things nowadays aren't authentic. You have products and it says made with real apples. You would hope that it would always been made with real apples, but they made a point of mentioning that. So many things are, you know, pseudo or imitation.
Right now made with real apples.
Homemade.
Contact yesterday from Paul Honor of Germany, and they're going to send me some beers to sample. They asked me, would you like to review some beers that are just coming to the United States? I said, certainly I would. How those taste, I hope they're good. But I'm figuring they're coming from Germany. That's usually a sure shot. But yeah, like you're talking about William legacy brands, it's kind of like that 1981 Jefferson Starship song, Find Your Way Back. Go back in time.
I think the Germans know how to make their beer. They're pretty qualified.
They seem to have a handle on it. You want me to give you a quick report on this 8-star?
Yeah.
It's a little bit lighter than the Beams. It's paler significantly, but it is. I'd like to put this in a blind taste test with some people. That would be an interesting little exercise, I must say. That was 99 cents for the 750 milliliter bottle. Okay. We talked about the vanilla, the wood, you know, the oak, the dried fruit. I think the sweetness, the caramel, all of these, but what's the word? It's muted. It's just subdued. It's not or it's subdued. It's muted. It's subdued. Covert. It's covert. The flavor, it's all there, but it's like a shadow of itself. But I have to admit, bad, unusual, or unfavorable about it. Why people would buy it, because they're getting wanted in Jim Beam and less. You know, but you're paying half the price. So some people are price conscious to the extreme, right?
And for those who are into it, it'll give you the same 40%. It's 80 proof.
It'll give you the same.
So if you want to alter your behavior temporarily, it'll do the trick. Just the same as all these other expensive brands.
It'll cost 50% less.
And you can't neglect that.
You'll get the same amount of liquid. You'll get the same, and you'll get everything you always wanted in Jim Beam and less. Willing to make that trade-off. I wouldn't be necessarily, but I have to say it's nothing ghastly liquors. This is certainly not one of them. And I was commenting last week. I said, I think that Beam Suntory must have pretty high standards. They're not going to let something come out of. Or it also said, now William has said Frankfurt, I believe. They're not going to let something come out of there that's substandard. And things Claremont
and Boston.
Frankfurt, I thought.
Boston.
It said Frankfurt.
Yeah, Claremont and Frankfurt, Kentucky.
I think Frankfurt is where the bottling. Sometimes they list the bottling takes place. What I'm reading off is off the blog that it mentions the two distilleries at Claremont and Boston. I'm reading that right off the side here.
All right, I believe you, and I think that this bottle is very cagey in what it says. Now, if you look carefully, it says 8-star brand.
They use.
It says bottled in Kentucky. Let's pay attention. for this and let people go. It says distilled by Springs Distilling Company. That's an alias for Jim Beam. In Frankfort, Kentucky, USA. But is it actually distilled in Kentucky, or is it distilled in Indiana under the Jim Beam? This is what we have to wonder. Or Kentucky Springs. I wonder about that. Yeah, but I'm wondering about.
Yeah, the wording on some of these bottles sometimes is interesting.
I guess it's all from Kentucky, but you know, a lot of these companies, they're buying that grain neutral spirits from that same place in Lawrenceburg, Indiana. The whiskey.
You know, as you drink the Jim Beam white label, the thing that impresses me over and over is the smoothness, the drinkability of it.
It's incredible. It is incredible.
I mean, you can sit and sip away at it. You don't need to add ice to it. You don't need to add mix to it. I mean, you can just pour it in your glass and sip away and think about the notes, the different flavors, the smells. I mean, and it, you know, I think it's a complex drink.
They mention on their website where you chew the whiskey. The Fred No mentions that, where you let it, and where you can let some of the flavor develop in your mouth. And this is something that the sippability, I'll use that word, is very high on this.
Mm-hmm.
I'm chewing this 8-star, like William instructs me to do. And when I chew on it, it's got a relatively incredible, stronger wood note, which is somewhat bizarre. But yeah, it has more wood, and the white has more sugar. More comments, and we got to get off. Like Victor says, whether beer, liquor, it doesn't matter. These companies tried hard enough to entertain people. People should stop bitching about it and enjoy it. Well, excuse my language, I was reading that. Nate says, my great-grandfather drank Olympia. The can said it's the water. Laugh out loud, I drank it too, good stuff. Yeah, I used to be able to get Olympia in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. So many and awesome stock. Have fun, guys. Yeah, it's a great time in the world for beer. I don't know about it for other things. Now, and for technology, I suppose. Victor says, so many popular beers. Subject to discuss, says Victor. Hello, Victor. If you like history, St. Louis has a brewery called Urban Chestnut, and they make several German lagers, says Nate. Most craft breweries don't do many lagers. They're starting to, though, if you notice. For the cover of mistakes doing lagers. Oh, open the can of worms. We better not go there. We'll figure out. Came up on my TV. Yeah, Tim. We'll talk offline on how you can join these hangouts. It's really not too difficult, to tell you the truth. Anyway, any last comments on the famous? I
enjoy it. I like it. Cheers. I would give it an A if we're grading these things. I mean, I think it's very well done.
I can see giving it any lower than an excellent score myself.
I got to show you this, Jay. We were talking one night on Facebook. This is the scotch that I've been buying lately, Dewar's White Label.
So I see that all around.
Yeah. If it's a blended Scotch whiskey, but I really enjoy it. It's not terribly expensive. I've only ever seen it in this 750 ml bottle, but I really enjoy it. It's something you can drink neat, and if you have a chance to ever pick up a bottle, give it a whirl.
I would, and I don't know why blended is such a dirty word these days. I was reading an old advertisement from Seagram's 7 Crown, 1969, I believe it was. It might have been Seagram's 100 Pipers. I can't remember. They were saying that they had this facility in Scotland guess you call it distillery operations. And they said that they had these guys, these laboratory technicians, these blenders that would blend literally 100 different Scotch whiskeys to make, it must have been 100 pipers. That's what it was. Over 100 different ones. They weren't just like stuff in a vat. They were sitting there in a laboratory having to taste these 100 different scotches to blend 100 pipers. So I can believe what you're saying. It is a bad word. And in fact, 45, 50 years ago, blended was a word that people ran after.
Yeah. Yeah, it's when I first got into Scotch years ago, you know, just because of what I was reading, I was naturally going after the single malts. But in recent years,
Yeah.
I've really enjoyed the blended whiskeys, and I intend to explore them even more so.
Yes, and I have a bottle of 100 pipers right there in my cabinet, I might mention. If anybody wants to look at that down the road.
I don't know if I can get that up here. I'd have to check.
Okay,
I'll have to
William,
poke
last.
around.
I'd say this bean's for you. What could be more American than drinking a Budweiser and chasing it with Jim Beam White Label? I mean, that's like the American flag, apple pie, and everything rolled up into one. So it's a good product, and I'll probably buy it again.
Like I said, it's something
Not to
I
mention-
always keep in my liquor cabinet. It's you know, I sip away. It's not like I go through a bottle a week by any stretch of the means, but it's, you know, it's something that I go back to and I sip away at it, and then, you know, several weeks later I go back to and have another little sip. It's an enjoyable experience.
It can always be your default whiskey, bourbon.
I like that
Yeah.
word. Take care, and I'll see y'all soon, I'm pretty sure. Thank you so much, Michael. I thank you to the group now.
Thank you, Jay. I hope to join you again soon.
I enjoyed meeting you.
It's good to meet you, William. I've watched you a few times on here, and you always offer insightful comments. So it's nice to
Thank
chat
you.
with you.
I haven't been doing this very long either, so it's
Good stuff.
thank you.
Hey, will you guys take care? Take it and be safe out there, people.
All right then.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye bye.
We'll see you.